Hi, it's Alaska Granny. As preppers, we've been doing our best to have a stockpile of the food and prepping supplies that we need. We build up our stockpile a little at a time so that we are prepared to provide for ourselves and our family no matter what the future holds. Can the government seize your property? Can FEMA take your food and your prepping supplies? What are some of the executive powers, for example, from the COVID-19 response? In 2020, governors across the country were using emergency declarations and executive orders in a broad range of responses, including commandeering private property. In California, for example, Governor Gavin Newsom issued an executive order allowing him to commandeer hotels to aid in the response to the virus. Newsom is authorized to commandeer any private property deemed necessary to respond to an ongoing emergency under the California Emergency Services Act. Laws in several other states, including Colorado, Indiana, and Minnesota, similarly authorize the executive branch to swiftly acquire private property during a peacetime emergency. That may seem extreme, but even the Supreme Court has recognized the expansive authority of state governments. Going back to smallpox, the Supreme Court upheld Massachusetts' right to order compulsory vaccinations of adults. In Galveston, Texas, a judge stated that he did not believe that a countywide shutdown of bars and restaurants was legal, and an Ohio trial court judge rejected a state's attempt to postpone a primary election. However, as you wait for those things to go through the court, sometimes the government goes around it and does whatever they want. Remember when President Trump declared a national emergency and invoked the powers of the Stafford Act and the Defense Production Act? That was when people were unsure about COVID and they wanted more PPE and ventilators. You may also recall the debate surrounding President Trump's ability to declare a national emergency and an attempt to build portions of a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. The United States District Court held that the Trump administration could not rely on these emergency powers to apply funds not allocated for the wall. According to the co-director of the Liberty and National Security Program at NYU School of Law, in contrast to the situation at the border wall, which was in no way an emergency, and the president's declaration went against Congress's will, this is a situation where we face a true emergency, and members of Congress have actually been encouraging the president to take this action. I don't know how you could decide there's no crisis at the border and that there is a medical emergency. And so that's where we need to really think about what are our choices? How do we prepare, realizing this type of attitude and information? FEMA gives the advice itself. If an earthquake, hurricane, winter storm, or other disaster strikes your community, you might not have access to food, water, and electricity for days or even weeks. By taking some time now to store emergency food and water supplies, you can provide for your entire family. So yes, FEMA is encouraging you to be supplied. Even though it's unlikely that an emergency would cut off your food supply for 2 weeks, consider maintaining a supply that will last that long. Does that mean that's all you're allowed to have? If you have more than 2 weeks, are you hoarding? There have been multiple orders passed by sitting presidents that prevent hoarding. The problem is there is no clear explanation of the difference between stockpiling for emergencies and hoarding. What if you have a stockpile but your neighbor doesn't? Is it different from stockpiling foods for emergency purposes? Some of the legal codes that have been passed, hoarding of designated scarce materials, states, in order to prevent hoarding, no person shall accumulate in excess of the reasonable demands of business, personal, or home consumption. Does that give you pause? President Kennedy signed an order that gives the government authority to take over all agricultural production and distribution. Agricultural products are food, you realize. President Reagan signed an executive order that includes preparing plans and procedures to share between and among the responsible agencies' resources such as food, supplies, water, and workforce. President Clinton signed an executive order which stated that the law allows the federal government to seize hoarded food supplies from both public and private sources. President Clinton also issued an executive order to include the confiscation of water resources in addition to all food that is capable of being ingested by either human beings or animals. President Obama signed an executive order which allows the federal government to seize and redistribute food, water, and other resources when the U.S. is in a state of emergency. Supposedly, these executive orders are designed to go into effect only during a state of emergency. But isn't that the point of stockpiling? To have things for emergencies. Stockpiling isn't illegal, but you may need to take extra precautions to safeguard your stockpile. Stockpiling could become illegal if the country were in a state of emergency and the item you have is considered essential. I don't know anyone who doesn't think of food as essential. If the country's in a state of emergency, the president could pass an executive order that would allow government to seize food and water from citizens. Most Americans are not prepared for major disasters, so they would be dependent on FEMA to provide food and other resources. If FEMA uses up their stockpile, where will they go next? Factories, wholesalers, the stockpiles of its citizens? This certainly gives rise to the importance of keeping your stockpile a secret. Don't talk about your emergency supplies to anyone. Store your supplies out of sight. Should there become an emergency, you don't want people coming to you for help. Even if they don't know you have a stockpile, people are always asking somebody else to do something for them. Just look how quickly GoFundMe accounts seem to pop up on the internet, left and right. Is it wise to stash a little extra for the family members who will inevitably show up on your doorstep if friends and family came to you and they were truly in need? And yes, we want to make sure that we have enough to supply the needs of ourselves and our families and sustain us through even long-term emergency situations. But it might be something to think about to have a little, maybe a Ziploc bag of rice or beans, or a little jar of oatmeal or pasta that you could pass on to them. A can of food that's just simple. If you seem to have almost nothing, but you're willing to share a little bit, perhaps they'll be on their way and try to get from somebody else. So those are some hard choices we're going to have to make in the future, realizing that the government and FEMA could actually seize your food storage stockpile and even your prepping supplies. OPSEC, they say, operational security. Figure out who you can trust, who can trust you, and then keep your prepping to yourself. It's becoming more important now than ever before. If you have any ideas on how to help store our food, to help protect it from being seized when we need it the most, leave it in the comments below so we can develop ideas to help keep ourselves and our families as safe as possible. If you found my video useful, I hope you'll share it with someone else you think might enjoy it. Please subscribe to the Alaska Granny channel.